Chapter 3. A Queen's Mistake. Instead of helping Mary, Elizabeth sent her to a country house. Mary was forced to stay there. She was Elizabeth's prisoner. The sad story of Mary, Queen of Scots, shows that it is not always an advantage in life to be royal or to be skilled in the use of codes. Mary's father was King James V of Scotland. His wife was French, and Mary was born in 1542. Mary's father died when she was just 6 days old, and when she was a year old, she became Queen of the Scots. At 5 years old, she was sent to France. It was not safe for her in Scotland. England's King Henry VIII wanted to take Scotland, and he began to attack the country. At the age of 15, Mary married Francis, son of the King of France, but he died 2 years later, and she returned to Scotland. Her next marriage was to her Scottish cousin, Henry Stuart, and they had one child, a son. But Stuart made many enemies. These enemies tried to kill him once and failed. The second time, they were successful. Most people thought that one of Stuart's killers was Lord Bothwell. 2 queens. A few months later, Mary married Lord Bothwell. But other lords were angered by his new position, and Mary ran away to England to ask for help from her cousin, Elizabeth I. Elizabeth was worried, though, about Mary's Catholic religion. England's kings and queens had also followed the Catholic religion until Elizabeth's father, Henry VIII, had made England a Protestant country. So many English Catholics wanted Mary to be Queen of England, not Elizabeth. Instead of helping Mary, Elizabeth sent her to a country house. Mary was forced to stay there. She was Elizabeth's prisoner. Mary was not punished in any way, and even had servants to help her, but she could not travel or have visitors without Elizabeth's permission. Years passed, and Mary began to understand that she would die as a prisoner. Still, she had some hope. The Catholic King of Spain, Philip II, was ready to attack England after Elizabeth died. French armies also wanted to attack England, but were afraid of Elizabeth. And there were many people in England who did not want Elizabeth to be their queen. Both Mary and Elizabeth heard news about these unhappy people from their own spies. The kings and queens of England had had spies since 1324, when King Edward II ordered all letters to or from England to be opened and read. A royal sight. She had a special way to get news from her friends and supporters. Every few days, Gilbert Gifford delivered beer to the house where Mary stayed. He left full beer containers and picked up the empty ones. They were not completely empty. Both the full containers and the empty ones often had secret notes hidden in them. Mary's servants put one message inside a container and took another out. Gifford's job was to deliver the messages between Mary and her spy, Anthony Babington. Babington had many contacts among important people who wanted to kill Elizabeth. But he and Mary both knew they had to be careful. If anyone found the messages, then Babington would certainly be killed. Even Mary might be killed. Instead of writing in plain English, Mary used her own personal secret cipher. Mary's cipher used numbers and symbols for 23 letters of the alphabet. There were no symbols for J, V, or W. There were also symbols that meant nothing. These could be used between words as spaces, or just to confuse anyone reading the message. Mary also had 24 other symbols that were used as codes for her name and for common words, and one symbol to show double letters. Mary thought that no one would find her secret messages, but she was wrong. She also thought that if anyone found the messages, then they would not be able to read her secret cipher. But she was wrong again. Gilbert Gifford was really working for Elizabeth's secretary, Sir Francis Walsingham. Walsingham wanted to get rid of Mary, but knew that Elizabeth was afraid of killing a Catholic queen. She thought it would anger other Catholic kings and queens, and perhaps start a war with the rest of Europe. She was also afraid that Elizabeth's own people would not like it and would fight against her. Walsingham needed clear information to show that Mary wanted to kill Elizabeth, and he found it in the secret letters. The final message. When Gifford received a letter from Mary, he gave it to Walsingham before he gave it to Babington. Walsingham gave it to Thomas Philippes, a language specialist. Philippes was good at breaking secret ciphers. He copied the message, and he and his team started working on it. Each letter was quickly returned to Gifford so he could give it to Babington. It was important that Mary and Babington should not notice an unusual delay. Philippes studied the ciphered messages using a method developed by an Arab code breaker named Abu Yusuf al-Kindi. When al-Kindi looked at different languages, he discovered that some letters were used much more than others. In English, the order of the most common letters is E, T, A, O, I, N, S, H, R, D, L, U. The letter E usually appears about 13 times in 100 letters. The least common letter, Z, only appears once. Philippes quickly deciphered the message by finding some letters and guessing at others. Soon Walsingham could read everything that Mary and Babington wrote. Babington explained his plans to kill Queen Elizabeth, as well as Walsingham and others. Mary wrote back and said she understood. This was the message Walsingham was waiting for. But Babington wrote about 6 other men who would help him. Walsingham wanted to know their names too. Walsingham asked Philippes to add a few sentences to the letter before Gifford gave it to Babington. Philippes used Mary's code and copied her handwriting. In the new message, Philippes asked Babington for the names of the other 6 men. Perhaps Babington knew that something was wrong. He tried to leave England for Spain, but was taken prisoner. He and 12 other men were hanged. The next year, Mary was taken to a special court. At first, she was calm and said she knew nothing about the plans to kill Elizabeth, or to invite the Spanish king to attack England. But then the court showed Mary her own letters, and she could not deny it. At the age of 44, Mary had her head cut off. A secret diary. Many other people have used personal ciphers for different reasons. One famous cipher was used by Samuel Pepys. His cousin got him a job in the government in London. Pepys was intelligent and a hard worker, and he was soon given better and better jobs. In time, he became a friend of the King of England, Charles II. Pepys was a witness to many exciting events in the history of England, like the Great Fire of London. During this fire, much of the city burned down. In 1659, Pepys was 27 years old, and he decided to start writing a diary. He wrote his diary in a cipher so others could not read it, especially his wife. He used different symbols, and he also mixed words from English, French, and Portuguese as a kind of a code. Pepys wrote for himself and not for a newspaper or because he wanted to sell his diary in bookshops. So he did not try to make things sound better or worse than they really were. Today, Pepys' diaries give us a clear picture of an important time in English history. Remembering ciphers. Pepys' cipher was common when he lived, but after he died in 1703, his diaries were not read for more than 100 years. By then, no one remembered the cipher. Finally, in 1819, a man named Thomas Shelton spent 3 years deciphering the diaries. Sadly, he did not know that the cipher key was in another book on a bookshelf above the diaries. A big problem with ciphers is teaching people how to understand and remember them. Until 1915, the Russian army used an old cipher that was easy to break because poorly trained Russian soldiers could not remember newer ciphers. The Chinese general Sun Tzu had faced the same problem 2,500 years earlier. He used the first 40 words of a poem. After soldiers learned the poem, it was easy to teach them that each word in the poem was a code word for something else. Mistakes. The stories of Mary, Queen of Scots, Samuel Pepys, and the Russians show how one cannot always be confident about secret codes and ciphers. Mary believed that no one would ever discover the secret of her royal cipher. She knew enough to use a secret cipher, but not enough to understand that it could be broken. That mistake cost her her life. Mary's cipher did not protect her because she did not know the people who worked with her well enough. It was easy for one so-called friend to work with her enemies. Samuel Pepys had the opposite problem. He wrote in cipher only to stop his wife from reading about his private life. When he left directions to give his books to Cambridge University, he wanted someone to read his diaries, but the diaries were almost lost and forgotten. It is hard to understand the Russian army's use of an old cipher that they knew their enemies could decipher. Why did they not develop a new cipher or code? No one will ever know. Chapter 4. Unsolved Codes and Ciphers. The letter explained that the box contained secret information about a fortune in gold, silver, and jewels. In 1885, a small but unusual book was printed in the United States. It was called The Beale Papers. It tells a very strange story about a mysterious, lost fortune. The mystery began in 1820 with a man called Robert Morris. Morris owned a hotel in Lynchburg, Virginia, in the United States. One day, he had a few new visitors to his hotel, Thomas Jefferson Beale and his friends. Beale was intelligent and kind. He stayed for about 10 days and became friends with Morris. Morris said later that Beale was a handsome man, but that his face was very dark, like the face of a man who had spent a lot of time in the sun. Beale left, but he returned after 2 years and asked Morris to keep something for him. It was a small, locked metal box, and Beale told his friend that there were important papers inside. A little later, Beale sent Morris a letter. The letter explained that the box contained secret information about a fortune in gold, silver, and jewels. Beale promised to send the key for the box and information for decoding the messages inside it. The letter also said that Morris should open the box in 10 years if Beale did not return. Beale did not return. Nothing was ever heard from him again. He did not send the key, and he did not explain the secrets. Morris guessed that Native Americans had killed Beale, but he forgot about the box and did not open it until 1845. The box contained a few letters and other papers, including 3 pages of numbers. Morris did not understand the pages of numbers, but one of the letters was quite exciting. An explanation. The letter said that in 1818, Beale and about 30 other men had traveled in the American Southwest. Somewhere around Santa Fe, New Mexico, they had found gold and silver, lots of it. They traded some of the heavy silver for lighter jewels and took everything to the eastern United States. They then buried their fortune in a secret place in the ground where no one would find it. The letter also explained the 3 pages of numbers. The first page, it said, described where the secret fortune was buried. The second page explained what was included in the fortune. The third page gave the names of the people who should share the gold, silver, and jewels. These were the relatives of the men who found the fortune. Giving away secrets. Morris could not work out the strange numbers on the secret pages. For many years he tried to understand them, but he did not know where to start. In 1862, he gave the box and its papers to another man, J.B. Ward, to look at. Ward found a clue to the second of the 3 pages. He decided that there were too many numbers for them to be ciphers for letters. Instead, he guessed that each number represented a word in a book. The question was, which book? Ward decided that it must be a popular or famous book or document that anyone could find. Also, it must be one that existed when Beale wrote his pages of numbers. He started looking at different books and documents to see if one had words that matched the numbers in a meaningful way. Finally, he found an American government document that matched the second page of numbers. Ward compared the numbers and words and finally understood one of the three parts of the secret. This second page explained that the fortune was in Bedford, Virginia. It included 460 kilograms of gold and 1,729 kilograms of silver. There were also many jewels. The letter also explained that the gold, silver, and jewels were packed in iron pots with iron covers. All the pots were buried in a hole in the ground, about 2 meters deep, and covered with stones. The message said that the exact place was given in the first page of numbers. But the government document did not give clues to the first or third pages of numbers. Ward tried to find answers for the next 23 years, but he failed. In 1885, he explained everything in his book. People became very excited about the mystery of the Beale papers. Many did not wait to solve the mystery of the first page. They started to dig all around Bedford. The townspeople dug up their own gardens and farms. But the fortune has never been found. Even today, people still look for it. In today's money, the value of the gold, silver, and jewels is about £10 million. A big joke? Cipher breakers continue to look for solutions to the first and third pages in books as well as in other places. For example, old stories from Native Americans in the west of the United States talked about people taking their gold to the east of the country. Were these old stories about Beale? Perhaps the other pages are not the same kind of book code. But other people think the Beale story is not true, that the Beale papers is just a joke. They have looked for information about Morris, Beale, and Ward. Morris was probably a real person, but little information can be found about Beale or Ward. Some people say it is not likely that gold was found where the letter says it was. And why did Beale write letters in 3 different ciphers? Why not just use one? There are a lot of questions. Language specialists say that Beale uses words in his letter that were not popular in 1822. Perhaps someone else, not Beale, wrote the letters much later. But why would anyone go to so much trouble? One reason might be money, but not for the fortune hunters. Ward's book was very popular and made him a lot of money. Perhaps he simply made up the story. At the end of the Beale papers, Ward gives some good advice. He warns readers not to waste too much time looking for clues. The Voynich manuscript. 27 years after Ward's Beale papers book came out, an American book collector, Wilfred Voynich, visited an old house outside Rome in Italy. He found an old manuscript that was handwritten sometime around the 15th century. The pages of the book are about the size of this book's pages, but the Voynich manuscript is much thicker. and much more difficult to understand. It is completely in cipher. No one has been able to understand it. The Voynich manuscript is also filled with very unusual pictures. Many of them look like scientific drawings of plants and views from telescopes. But there are also many small, odd pictures of women in baths. The baths are connected like the branches of plants. One solution may be to study as many old European languages as possible and search for a cipher that fits.